Western. This was the theater of war in Western Europe, primarily France, Belgium, and Germany. It is most famous for the massive Allied amphibious invasion of Normandy on D-Day in 1944. This was followed by a series of brutal, large-scale battles, including the liberation of France, the failed Operation Market Garden, and Germany's desperate final counter-offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, as the Allies fought their way into Germany itself. Eastern. This was the largest and bloodiest land war in human history, fought between the Axis powers led by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The fighting was characterized by its immense scale, ideological brutality, and staggering casualties. Key battles like Stalingrad and Kursk, one of the largest armored clashes of the war, turned the tide of the conflict. Most German military casualties occurred on this front, and the Red Army's relentless advance ultimately led to the capture of Berlin. Italian/Mediterranean. After the Allied victory in North Africa, this front opened with the invasion of Sicily and then mainland Italy. The fight up the Italian peninsula proved to be a slow, brutal, and costly war of attrition, as Allied forces battled elite German troops who used the mountainous terrain to create a series of formidable defensive lines. The battles for Monte Cassino and the Anzio beachhead are infamous for their ferocity. This theater also included the wider naval and air struggle for control of the Mediterranean Sea. Balkan. This was a complex and brutal theater that began with Italy's invasion of Greece in 1940, followed by Germany's invasions of Yugoslavia and Greece in 1941. After a swift conventional defeat, the conflict transformed into a vicious guerrilla war, particularly in Yugoslavia, where communist partisans led by Josip Broz Tito tied down hundreds of thousands of Axis troops for years. The front also included the dramatic German airborne invasion and capture of the island of Crete. Scandinavian. This front was primarily defined by the German invasion of Denmark and Norway in 1940, known as Operation Weserübung. Germany's goal was to secure its vital iron ore supply route from Sweden and to gain naval and air bases to use against Great Britain. While Denmark fell in a matter of hours, Norwegian and Allied forces mounted a fierce 2-month resistance in the harsh northern terrain before being overwhelmed. Finnish. This was a series of conflicts fought between Finland and the Soviet Union. The Winter War of 1939-40 was a stunning David versus Goliath struggle, where the small Finnish army inflicted massive casualties on the invading Red Army, though they were eventually forced to concede territory. The Continuation War began in 1941, when Finland, seeking to regain its lost lands, joined Germany in its invasion of the Soviet Union, fighting a separate but parallel war on the northern flank of the Eastern Front. North African. This was a prolonged and dynamic war fought across the vast deserts of Libya and Egypt. The campaign was a series of back-and-forth offensives between the Allies and the Axis forces of Germany and Italy, defined by iconic tank battles and legendary leaders like Rommel and Montgomery. The Allied victory at the Second Battle of El Alamein helped turn the tide, and, together with Operation Torch and the Tunisia campaign, led to the Axis surrender in North Africa. East African. This was one of the first major Allied victories of the war. Fought in 1940 and 1941, this campaign pitted British Commonwealth forces against the armies of Fascist Italy in its colonies in East Africa, modern-day Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. The campaign was a mix of conventional battles and support for local resistance, and it resulted in the liberation of Ethiopia and the collapse of Italy's colonial empire. Middle East. This was a series of smaller but strategically vital campaigns to secure control of the oil-rich Middle East. It included the brief but important Anglo-Iraqi War of 1941, where British forces defeated a pro-Axis coup in Iraq. It also involved the Syria-Lebanon campaign, where Allied and Free French forces captured the colonies from Vichy France, and the joint Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran to secure a crucial supply corridor to the Soviet Union. Pacific Ocean. This was a vast naval and amphibious war fought between the United States and the Empire of Japan. It is defined by the island-hopping strategy, where U.S. forces would conduct massive invasions to capture a series of strategic islands to get ever closer to Japan. It was a war dominated by naval power, with decisive carrier versus carrier battles, like the Battle of Midway changing the course of the war. China. Often seen as the opening phase of the wider war in Asia and a major precursor to World War II, this front was a brutal and prolonged war of invasion and resistance that began in 1937. China fought a desperate, bloody struggle against the full might of the Japanese army, suffering immense military and civilian casualties. This front became a massive war of attrition that tied down a large share of Japan's ground forces for much of the war. Burma-India. This was a grueling campaign fought in the dense and unforgiving jungles of Burma. Allied forces, including American, British, Indian, and Chinese troops, fought a bitter struggle against the Japanese army for control of the region. The primary strategic goal was to reopen the Burma Road, a land supply route to China. The fighting here was characterized by brutal jungle combat and incredible logistical challenges. Southeast Asia. This front was defined by the stunningly rapid Japanese conquests in the early days of the war after Pearl Harbor. In a series of swift campaigns, Japanese forces overran British Malaya and captured the supposedly impregnable fortress of Singapore. They also invaded and conquered the resource-rich Dutch East Indies, modern Indonesia, securing a vast colonial empire and vital oil reserves. Soviet-Japanese. For most of the war, the Soviet Union and Japan maintained a fragile neutrality. However, in the final days of the war, in August 1945, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and launched a massive surprise invasion of Japanese-occupied Manchuria. The Red Army's powerful offensive, known as Operation August Storm, rapidly overwhelmed and defeated the Japanese Kwantung Army, hastening Japan's surrender and changing the post-war map of Asia. Atlantic and Arctic. This was the longest continuous military campaign of the entire war, a brutal struggle for control of the sea lanes. The primary component was the Battle of the Atlantic, where German U-boats, operating in deadly wolf packs, attempted to blockade and starve Great Britain by sinking the vital convoys of merchant ships bringing supplies from North America. The second component was the Arctic convoys, a series of perilous voyages where Allied ships braved U-boat attacks, German bombers, and extreme Arctic weather to deliver critical war materials to the Soviet Union. Thanks for watching. Which front do you think ultimately mattered most to the outcome of the war? Let me know in the comments. Also, please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.